to Lifetime Uncorked, the show where we break down your favorite made-for-TV movies one bottle at a time. I'm your host, Patrick Serrano, and today the movie we're talking about is... I don't know what it is. Sleeping with Danger. Movie stars Elisabeth Rohm, Antonio Cupo. Sorry if I pronounced your names wrong. This movie was actually based on a book by Anne Rule, who was a true crime writer. She passed away in 2015, but gets a writing credit here. Good for you, Anne. On the show, we either pour it up or put a cork in it. Pour it up means yes, put a cork in it means no thank you. This week, we are going to pour it up. Before we get started today, if you are a survivor of domestic violence and you need support, you can contact the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-7233. Text LOVEIS to 22522. You are not alone. Sleeping with Danger begins with a Lifetime movie staple. A woman running for her life through the woods. Flash to 1994. Hello, landline phones. We've missed you. We meet Grace, played by Elisabeth Rohm from Law and Order. She meets a handsome doctor named Paul who looks like Ben Higgins from The Bachelor. They go out on a date that leads to a lot of sexy time. Like, hide your kids, sexy time. The sex, unfortunately, turns out to be violent, and Grace confronts her new boyfriend about the incident. Dr. Paul apologizes. Just because Dr. Paul says he's sorry doesn't mean he changes any of his behavior. He entraps Grace into a pyramid scheme, isolates her from her friends, and moves Grace into a literal cabin in the woods. Things get worse when Grace finds legal documents of Paul's accusing him of stalking his ex and being a peeping Tom. When she asks him about it, he slaps her. Grace returns to the city to stay with her friend Sherry. Sherry is very supportive and patient with her friend, even when Grace decides to take Dr. Paul back. He performs this stupid grand gesture. What a waste of paper. Dr. Paul puts Grace on the spot in front of her friends and family by proposing to her. Once she agrees, he ups his emotional, physical, and psychological abuse on his bride-to-be. He even pulls out a gun and shoots it at Grace. Grace puts herself into a shelter for abused women and rationalizes Paul's behavior. Grace decides that she needs to set boundaries with Paul, and once she feels that she has control over the situation, she moves back in with him. Sensing that he is losing control over Grace, Paul begins to make green smoothies with poison in them. Yay! This keeps Grace weakened so she can't fight back against him. It's a trope used many times in Lifetime movies, but here it feels a little bit less Lifetime villain and a little bit more manipulative asshole. This is when Paul rapes Grace. She manages to escape and to get help. 2 years later, Grace is in hiding. She has a detective helping her on the case to find Paul before he can hurt anyone else. It's too late because Paul kills his new girlfriend and coworker, and then finally himself. It's a disturbing ending to a Lifetime movie, but it's the conclusion that needed to happen. Grace shares her story with the abuse victim support group and dedicates her life to helping other victims, much like the author of the New York Times best-selling book, which this movie is based. That author is Anne Rule. Props to her. She's awesome. And that is Sleeping with Danger. It is time for ratings. I'm going to give this one 5 knives because it was well done. The depictions of the abuse was disturbing, and if you're triggered by that, I would say maybe skip this one. Some things I liked about the movie, obviously the performances were amazing. I love that Elisabeth Rohm really went in there. She played Grace, just like the mental, the physical, the emotional abuse, and the fact that she's justifying everything and trying to make excuses as to why it's happening seemed really true to life and really well written. Also, Dr. Paul didn't come off as your typical Lifetime villain, killing people in the back of cars with like a rope around the neck or whatever. He seemed like an actual abuser one might come across in the world. Once you're in that situation, it can be very hard to get out. On Twitter, I saw a lot of people victim blaming. On Twitter, I saw a lot of people victim blaming, which is not cool. You can't blame the victim because sometimes they have no choice but to stay in that relationship, especially in these times that we are in. Now it is time for the Minority Report, the segment where we talk about representation and why it matters in TV movies. In this movie, we didn't have that many characters outside of the two protagonists, Dr. Paul and Grace, but we did have a best friend. Her name was Sherry, and she was awesome. I love to see a good Latinx character in there supporting her friend. We also, of course, have the detective. We had Stuart, Dr. Paul's coworker, who actually ends up dying in the end, so that was not the best. And with that, I think that wraps up this week's episode. Don't forget to follow me at Patrick Miguel or the podcast, not the podcast, the show at Lifetime on Court. Check out our website, lifetimeoncourt.com. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and click the bell or whatever you do need to say.